welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. My name is Laurie, and this week I'm actually putting out a little bit of a bonus episode that is something special. This is an opportunity for you to learn a little bit about my story as opposed to me interviewing other people. Kind of feels weird to be on the other side of the conversation, but this is an episode that I have dropping on this feed that is from a good friend of the pod. You'll know her well, Shannon from Australia. She's been in all of the mini-series basically so far, including the first 2 episodes of the BPD relationship series and the BPD symptoms series, pretty much all of them. And I think the DBT skills series for part of them as well. So you know Shannon well. What you may not know about Shannon is that she has her own podcast called If These Trees Could Talk. She is based in Australia and has some amazing stories about the land out there. If you know her story, you'll know she's a big nature person, unlike me. Her and her friend Megan have a podcast called If These Trees Could Talk, and it's stories of beautiful Australian nature and all of the stories that it has to share. As well as now she's doing a kind of sub-series called What Would They Say? I'm one of the guests on the What Would They Say side of the podcast. We talk all about what it is like to live with borderline personality disorder, to become an advocate and try and change the narrative. And yeah, we kind of get into a little bit more of my story that you may not have heard before. So I highly encourage you to head over on your podcast app to the show If These Trees Could Talk. Follow that pod. They have amazing content over there. You can listen to the story on either of our feeds now, but definitely go give Shannon some love. Rate, review, subscribe, all of those things that make us podcasters very happy and keeps us going. When I create podcasts, I often give people a few title options to choose from, and of course, like, it's their story, so I'm just here to share it. So I let them choose what title they want. Shannon at that point hadn't actually asked about what title I wanted, and so I opened up the show notes, and her title was Because She Leads, We Live, with Laurie Edmondson. I felt like I was hit with this like giant wall of overwhelm and love, and just like awe at the fact that anybody feels that way about the work that I do. I mean, we all know, Shannon, you know I love you, but just I appreciate everybody who listens to this show, who supports the show in any way that they can, and who has been part of my journey, because all of you have got me here. So with that, I will have you listen to this beautiful episode. Thank you again so much, Shannon, for having me on the show.
Sometimes the people who change our lives are not the ones who set out to lead. They're not the loudest voices in the room or the ones who seem to have everything figured out. Often they are simply the ones who are brave enough to speak honestly about the parts of being human that many of us are still trying to understand. The messy parts, the painful parts, the parts we've been taught to carry quietly. And when someone is willing to put words to those experiences, to say the things so many people are feeling but don't know how to express, something powerful happens. Someone hears their own story reflected back to them. Someone who thought they were the only one suddenly realises they're not alone. And in that moment, honesty becomes something more than just a story being shared. It becomes a kind of light, a reminder that even in the most difficult moments of being human, connection is still possible. And sometimes that connection is exactly what someone needs to keep going. Welcome to What Would They Say? Before we begin today's conversation, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm recording on the traditional lands of the Awabakal people. Today's conversation reaches across the Pacific to British Columbia, where our guest joins us from the unceded territories of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. I acknowledge the deep and ongoing connection all Indigenous peoples have to these lands and wish to share my gratitude and respect towards their communities, both past and present, who have cared for them for countless generations.
You don't make money doing podcasts like this. You lose money doing podcasts like this. This is a passion project. I know that the work I've done has changed like hundreds of lives. Everything in my life led me to this exact moment, and I'm totally cool with that. I get to help try to make even the smallest incremental change in huge, massive systems that have a hard time changing. Stay alive or stay out of jail, those were ifs. The chances of being on the other side of that were way higher than being where I am now.
Some people become role models because they seem to have everything figured out. Others become role models because they're willing to be honest about the parts of life that are messy, painful, and uncertain. Laurie Edmondson is one of those people. Her leadership didn't begin with a title or a platform. It began with survival, with the courage to speak openly about mental health, about intense emotions, and about what it takes to keep choosing life when things feel overwhelming. Through that honesty, she created something incredibly powerful. Spaces where people who have often felt misunderstood can finally realise that they are not alone. Laurie is the founder of the Super Feelers community, podcast and peer support group, and a passionate advocate for people living with complex mental health experiences. But perhaps the most powerful part of her story is this. At a time when she needed someone to look up to the most, Laurie made the decision to become the role model that she couldn't find. And sometimes when one person is brave enough to lead in that way, it creates something bigger than they ever imagined. Because when one person leads with honesty and courage, others realise that they can live too. Laurie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm always on the other side of these conversations, so I can't believe that I'm the one being interviewed. It's the first time ever.
It feels kind of nice to flip the table on you.
I'm nervous, which is hilarious because I've done like 500 podcast episodes as the interviewer or something saying, it's okay, you don't need to be nervous. And here I am like, oh God, now I'm nervous. The irony.
Just for the listeners so they can understand, Laurie and I have recorded together before quite a few times, and I do think there are a few of our listeners that do listen to the Super Feelers episodes as well. So it's generally Laurie running the show and us bearing our souls. But today we're going to swap that dynamic, which is a bit of a boost for me too, because Laurie is one of my idols and it is the reason why I wanted to talk to her about leadership. So Laurie, do you want to tell people who haven't met you before what you do and who you are?
Well, my name is Laurie. I live in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada, which is the unceded traditional territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. It's about an hour and a half, 2.5, depending on traffic, away from Vancouver, British Columbia, if that's more familiar for you. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am a person who lives with borderline personality disorder, anxiety, all sorts of other problems. And I have tried really hard to make those problems useful, I suppose, is the best way of wording that. I mean, Shannon talked to me about this a little bit earlier, but about being your own role model, because I went through, I'm 32 now. I had been mentally ill for basically my entire childhood and had so many challenges, was quite a violent person as a young person. And my family really struggled. I really struggled. The system really struggled to support me. And when I finally received the appropriate diagnosis, which was a borderline personality disorder that kind of explained all of the things about why I was the way that I was and what gave me an opportunity to move forward, I Googled it, looked for role models, and was like, oh my God, there are none. I'm just going to die alone. And nobody's going to treat me and all of these horrible things that people talk about people like me as. Me and Shannon, are you cool with us talking about that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Shannon and I both live with the same condition. So I really wanted to be the person that I didn't have when I really needed somebody to look up to. And I kind of have accidentally, but maybe some sort of real reason that I fell into working in healthcare and really trying to make system changes for people who are trying to access services that are really not designed for them, because that's how I felt my whole life. I have 3 cats. One of them is absolutely ridiculous. His name is Gus. If you follow me on social media, you know Gus. He will probably scream at the door at some point. He does every time. And I have a husband, lots of friends. I do a lot of yoga, and I'm a podcaster. I guess that's important. So as part of this advocacy and like trying to make my story into something useful, it seems like such a weird way of wording that, but here we are. That's where we're going this morning. I had started actually when I was probably like 21-ish. So a couple years after my diagnosis, speaking to kids in high schools about mental health conditions. One of the really interesting parts about that was that I was hired to speak to kids about mental health conditions, but I was not allowed to speak about having a personality disorder, and I was not allowed to speak about self-harm. So I was allowed to talk about depression and anxiety, and that was it. Which, those are very important things. But most of my issues really aren't tied to those issues, right? So I did that for, I think, about a year, spoke to a lot of high school kids, got involved with a provincial initiative called the Child and Youth Mental Health and Substance Use Collaborative. I'm going into the real details here, but here we are.
I love it.
Perfect. Where I was, there were 64 teams in our province that were trying to tackle various mental health and substance use challenges for children and youth. And I was kind of brought in as like a youth with lived experience because we defined youth up to 25 at that point. I ended up within not very long becoming hired on by the team as an assistant, and then became the lead of the team, which was the first time that had ever happened in the provincial initiative. And most of the team leaders were like experienced project managers or health providers and that kind of thing. And so that really also kind of skyrocketed my advocacy journey in that locally, people kind of know who I was, and I was able to get some cool opportunities speaking at conferences and really sharing my voice. And I was able to start branching out from that high school experience of not being able to speak about the things that really matter to me. Then I started working in a kind of a different area of health, which was fascinating, but not particularly relevant to this conversation. COVID happened as I was working in health. I was working in rural and First Nation health. And some random girl on Instagram messaged me because I had started, as part of my like boring COVID project, started posting reels of me talking about DBT skills. This was maybe 2019, 2020, really early. And this girl reached out to me, said, "Hey, I have a podcast. I want to interview you for it." So I did that. And then we decided to create our own podcast together. And then I branched out and did my own podcast called Super Feeler. And that's where Shannon is featured often. Shannon is a very regular contributor to the Super Feeler podcast. I chose the name Super Feeler because I think there's so many parts of living with this highly stigmatized, very misunderstood condition that people think that it's all negative. And there are so many beautiful things about living with borderline personality disorder, including meeting people like Shannon, who are absolutely spectacular human beings, and our whole community. And just like our ability to love each other and love others and be excited and feel strongly and be able to walk into a room and understand what everybody's going through really quickly. And so Super Feeler is kind of this concept of like a superpower and taking back the narrative that, yes, we may like on paper have a personality disorder, but really it's just part of who we are. And that is a positive and a negative.
You're saying about taking back the power. Do you want to talk about some of the stigma that's associated with personality disorders?
Yeah. How long do we have? So personality disorders, and I'll speak mostly about borderline personality disorder specifically, just because that's the area in which I am more well-versed, I suppose. In North America and Australia, we use something called the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual. This is basically called like the Bible of psychiatry. If you're international to those areas, you might be using something called the International Classification of Diseases, the ICD. There are 9 criteria that people with borderline personality disorder may have, and you need 5 of the 9. And here's where we're going to test ourselves, Shannon. We have intense interpersonal relationships, challenges with anger management. I'm not using the exact terminology because this is off the top of my head, but we can find it. Shannon's also Googling it for me for when I inevitably forget one.
No, I'm not.
Impulsivity. Oh, you're not? I thought you were. It looked like you were typing. Impulsivity, idealization and devaluation, abandonment issues it's worded differently than that. Challenges with suicide and self-harm, dissociative challenges, and sometimes that can be like paranoia.
Identity disturbances.
Yeah, identity disturbances. Yeah. So that means like not necessarily knowing who you are or having your personality kind of like shift towards other people that you're around, kind of like a chameleon.
Affective instability. Yeah,
oh my God,
that is reactivity with mood and
like rapidly shifting moods.
Yes, the ups and downs. Chronic feelings of emptiness.
There you go. That's the one. I always forget that one.
Did you mention anger?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay. So you did a pretty great job there.
I tried really hard. The chronic feelings of emptiness one gets me every time for some reason, and I think it's because I don't personally experience that one, and so it kind of gets left off of my list when I do it by memory. So there's 9 different criteria. You need to meet 5 of the 9 to meet the definition of the disorder, which means there's 256 symptoms combinations if you were to kind of add all those up and do some fancy math. So we all look totally different, and we're all unique human beings. I like to think of us as like snowflakes, like not one of us is the same, doesn't matter what diagnosis we have. One of the big challenges with BPD is having an immense amount of stigma coming towards us, and particularly stigma from healthcare providers, which is actually super interesting. So one of the most, if not the most stigmatized mental health condition by healthcare providers and mental health providers, and there's been a ton of research in that area. Not a ton of research about like how to deal with it, but a ton of research about the fact that it exists. And one of the big issues that kind of presents itself as is when we try and access services, oftentimes we are told, like, you're not sick enough, or you're too crazy for us to deal with, or you're manipulative, or if I provide you with care, then that's like enabling you or making you get what you want, which is attention. So there's all of these like weird back end things that happen, and it's really ingrained in healthcare, which is wild. And I wish that I could say that like this has significantly improved. And I have really great interactions in my work with people every day who are incredibly not stigmatizing to people with borderline, but they are still out there. And it's really, really hard for me to not like, I'm always like, let me at him, you know, it happens all the time. So a lot of the time it's something that people are rejected from treatment for as like a disqualification for certain treatments. And it's really just about misunderstanding and the fact that, you know, Shannon and I both live with this condition. We're having this conversation right now. Both of us are like articulate, educated, nice humans.
Self-aware, maybe.
Self-aware, have insight. The insight thing is massive. But I can almost guarantee you that we have both been not all of those things. When you present to healthcare services, you're usually in one of your worst states. And so it makes sense that if you're seeing people only with a label in their worst day every single time, you start to think that everybody with that label is that over and over and over again. And then you treat them badly, and then they react to you treating them badly, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. In a lot of ways, that's why I do what I do, is because I know that when people see me in like a professional environment or even like a social environment, they don't think I have BPD, right? They see me as a leader or a manager or any of these things. And then when they find out I have BPD, I'm automatically challenging all of those assumptions that they've made about people like me. And then you'll always have the people, and Shannon, you've probably heard this too, of like, you can't have BPD, you're not fucked up enough. But that's not true. And that's contributing to the stigma, right? And this self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more conversations we can have and the more we can get in people's brains as examples that counter their narrative, the less stigma we can have, which is why what we're doing is important. The research about BPD stigma, actually almost all the conclusion is you need what they call contact-based stigma reduction initiatives, which is where you have somebody with the disorder come in and provide the education, because then you challenge those narratives face to face, and the providers can't be like, well, that's what you're telling us, but that's not true. People with BPD aren't actually like that. And you're like, no, I am a person with BPD. I am like that. And so I actually every 6 weeks provide a anti-stigma education to one of the local mental health hospitals in our area and do just that. I'm just there and I talk to them. And a lot of the time people are like, whoa, I can't believe you have BPD. And I'm like, yeah, well, I could be one of your clients tomorrow, and that's important to talk about.
We are exceptionally lucky within our super feelers community to be able to talk openly about these types of things together.
I mean, we didn't really talk about the super feeler community, I guess, but we have a support group called the Super Feelers Club. You should all, if you have BPD, you should attend. Even if you think you have BPD or have really strong emotions and you're struggling, you should attend. It's the most beautiful place in my life. But, I get messages from people all over the world and have for the last 5 years. And it's like the biggest privilege ever to receive these messages from people saying, you're the first person I've ever heard talk about borderline. You're the only person I ever know that I've ever met that has borderline, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, honey, no, I'm not. It's like 1% to 6% of the general population has borderline. I can 100% guarantee you've met other people with borderline. But the more we keep this secretive, the more people feel alone. And that's what I think is so beautiful about the Super Feelers Club, is that none of us feel alone in that space.
This is a great place to add how I found you. And the reason that I chose this theme for this interview was that after I received my diagnosis, which was at 40, I had that same view. I was like, I've never met anyone with borderline before. I knew nothing about it. I'd been given no information. And so I started looking online. I wanted to try and find other people. And I really struggled to find people in that space that talked about it in a way that was not completely filled with stigma. There was lots of places where I could find negative things about it. Then I come across this little lady talking about, I think one of the very first episodes I listened to, you said, I just had no one to give me what I needed. So I thought I have to become my own role model. And listening to somebody else say that and to hear you speak about BPD in the way that you did, it gave me hope. It made me see that there were people out there who didn't feel ashamed to be honest about who they were. And in that moment, even though you were on the opposite side of the world, I had never had a conversation with you. I never in my wildest dreams thought that we would end up having the relationship that we do now. But I felt in that moment not alone in something that I felt so desperately alone in. It goes without saying that I am an avid supporter of the Super Feelers podcast because it did change my life. I attend the Super Feelers regularly and they are the best people. Laurie always says, like, I love these people more than life itself. And it's true. Like, I think we all feel like that about each other.
There's a reason people wake up at 3:00 in the morning or take the day off work or come after a long day. I mean, for context, it's a Zoom meeting, essentially. I mean, what an honor to even send the Zoom link out to create that space,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
So amazing. It is really, really beautiful. So now that people have an idea of who you are, there will be people listening who don't have BPD and can't relate to that part of our experience. But I think there is a power in here, in your story, Laurie, in a broader context. The first question I want to ask is, when you think back to that part of you that was struggling the most, what did you believe about yourself then that you know now not to be true?
That's a really good question. I think there's a few things, and taking this away from BPD specifically, even just struggling with intense anxiety as a kid and dysthymia, so like kind of chronic lower grade depression. I never thought that I would be normal, quote unquote normal. I never thought that I would be successful in whatever that looks like or have a life that felt stable. My life was anything but stable for a very long time. And there was part of me that felt that I would never have those things because I couldn't. And there was parts of me that felt that I couldn't have those things because I didn't deserve them. I think that there's a huge shift that has happened in my life with a few factors involved. I mean, one being access to dialectic behavior therapy, even if it was just the groups, significantly helpful. Medication, significantly helpful. Having a support system of friends that have really been through like hell and back with me many times and are still there, incredibly helpful. And recognizing that chosen family needs to come before blood family, and not having to sit in this regret and self-hatred that comes with having struggled a lot as a kid, and doing things that were not okay and that were harmful to others, but then also acknowledging that is the past. I can't change the past. I don't have a magic wand, and I'm doing everything I can to move forward and be the opposite of that person, and also change the outcome of other kids and other families that will go through similar things. Those are all huge components. I think building the Super Feelers Club and the Super Feeler podcast and meeting all of these incredible friends from literally every corner of this earth and feeling a sense of community and purpose, I guess, is a good way of doing it. I mean, Shannon knows you don't make money doing podcasts like this. You lose money doing podcasts like this. This is a passion project as far as you can define passion project. And every once in a while, I run into like days where I go, oh my God, is this even worth my time? And then I go back and read my messages and go, yes, of course, this is worth my time. I mean, it's cliche to say like, if I could change one life, blah, blah, blah. I know that the work I've done has changed like hundreds of lives, if not more. And that maybe sounds like I'm bragging, but no, it's literally, I know that for a fact because that's how many people reach out to me. And also I have a really amazing husband. And when I was diagnosed with BPD, I was told you'll never have a healthy, loving relationship. And I have like the most stable, healthy, loving relationship that I've ever seen, including like all of my like normal friends that don't have mental illness. We just work. And so I think the fact that I've been able to build something that I really didn't think I would ever have or deserve to have and feel happy and comfortable in that is the best thing that could have happened to me. And then to add this like cherry on top of being able to work within health systems in leadership roles where I know that I am there every single day to try and make the system better for people who the system doesn't work for. I worked for 6.5, 7 years in First Nations health. I'm a white lady, but I'm not Indigenous. And the motivation for me doing that work was because I knew that these were people who were trying to access health systems that were not designed for people like them. And in that way, I bonded with them in a big way because every time I access health systems, it's not set up for people like me. And now I don't work in First Nations health as much anymore, but now I work in mental health and substance use. So now I'm back to like my home base of like literally people like me who the system doesn't work for. And I get to help try to make even the smallest incremental change in huge, massive systems that have a hard time changing.
At what point in your journey did that belief change where you realized that feeling deeply wasn't a flaw, but something that you could actually use to propel yourself in the direction you've gone?
There's a few moments in my journey where I really have like this explicit memory of like change moments, you know, like light bulb moments or changing course. I can't think of one specifically for the moment when I realized that being a super feeler was a positive. In some ways, I think it's like accumulation of various things where, like, you know, you put me in a Cirque du Soleil environment, I'm living my best life. It is the most exciting, beautiful, amazing thing I have ever seen, and I am fully invested. I'm fully present. I'm weeping, I'm cheering, I'm laughing, I'm doing all of these things. To see like even my husband's face like looking at me because of how like hilariously entertaining it is to watch somebody get that excited about something. Same with like playing beer pong. I don't drink anymore, but like I am so invested in beer pong games that people mock me like all the time because I'm always like constantly, like every single time somebody throws something, everybody is just so entertained. I'm not faking it. I am literally that 100% invested in this completely ridiculous game that means absolutely nothing, but I am so excited about it. I think those are like the small moments that kind of build up to be like, okay, these feelings are not only valid, but like great and exciting and fun filled. And then I also, I mean, I can't take away the part about just like the Super Feelers Club and being able to hold space for people who are from all over the place, vastly different ages. I mean, I don't track age, but I would say we have people from like 18 to 70 probably. Is that probably what you would?
Yep.
If I had to guess, they, show up despite not knowing how to use Zoom, and they come every time, and to be able to hold space for people's emotions in a way that is so like beautiful and connection driven, I think is part of that super feeler inherent beauty in being able to feel that strongly. Because I can walk into a room and like feel the energy of people immediately. And that is sometimes really awful because if the energy's bad, if the energy's bad, you take that energy on. Being empathetic in that way can be super detrimental temporarily, but I think in the long term, I wouldn't give it up at all.
I want to add to that, and I know that you're going to agree with me. We are the most driven people you will ever meet. I think this plays a role in your story. Like, so you have a psychology degree?
Yeah, my bachelor's, yeah.
Yep.
My master's is health administration, so it's like a business degree. It's like an MBA, but for healthcare, essentially.
Yeah. And then we've got other healthcare workers, psychologists, lawyers. We are broken a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But we are also incredibly brilliant, incredibly driven. And some of my favorite super feeler episodes are where you hear somebody, getting to the end of their degree. And some of my most exciting super feeler group moments is when someone shows up and says, I've just started studying this. Yeah. And without a doubt that they are going to nail it.
100%. We are persistent. You cannot stop us. I mean, I wrote this quote down. Every once in a while, there's like a hilarious quote, and they usually come from one person, but this was from our last Super Feelers session. You barked up the wrong bisexual's tree, honey. And it's like, you do not mess with us, and not in like a we're gonna hurt you way, but in a like we are going to get the thing that we need, and we are going to not give up until we are heard, listened to, and valued. It's amazing to watch.
I had no concept that this is the community that I was entering into. Like, go back to that place where you're newly diagnosed and all of the news is bad. There's no treatment. And I agree, DBT changed my life.
Yeah. And there's other treatments too. I mean, Shannon and I are like obsessed with DBT, but it's one of many options. So keep that in mind. Yes,
but there is little hope. Recovery is hard, possible, but hard. Everything seems like it's this big, huge thing. And so then I was nervous about even looking for community in that space because I thought, who are these people that I'm going into? And my fundamental belief is that generally I'm a bad person, but my wise
I think that's most of our fundamental beliefs. Yeah.
That's right. So I'm like, am I just going to be entering into this community? My head was full of stigma. I was
totally
stigmatizing my perception of what I was entering into. And then I go into this group of accomplished, powerful, passionate, 9 times out of 10, we are joy-filled. The things that we commit to just bring us all kinds. So, we talk about the negative side of it, but what we experience on the low side, we also experience on the high side,
Exactly,
i.e. Laurie at Cirque du Soleil, me when I find elephant seals on a beach.
Yes, that's the best. Unless somebody has their phone out, and then you're going to beat them. I don't know if you've told that story on this podcast, but Shannon does not mess around with people who are taking videos of seals on the beach.
Penguins. That was
my God, penguins. I'm so sorry. But still animals on the beach that you're not allowed to take pictures of. She will mess you up.
Yeah, she will. So I get into this space, and this is what I find. And I'm like, here are my people. And then you talking about the empathy side of it. So we've got this incredible, amazing group of accomplished people who all pick up on what each other are feeling.
Yeah.
So you can't even show up and pretend that you're okay if you're a little bit not okay.
Oh, no.
Because everybody else there is going to call you on that because they're going to know. It really is the most incredible community of people. Laurie, I think you realise a little bit, but I don't know if you understand what it's like for us. And you said, you could have hundreds of people whose lives you've changed. I could get 20 on the phone in about 3 minutes if you needed proof.
It's true.
But what happens for us when we have that space to show up and be exactly who we are at that moment? And one week I can turn up and I can cry the whole time. Mm-hmm. And then the next session I will turn up and I might be manic and totally obsessed about something that's going on. And I get to share that joy with everybody. And then the next time I might turn up and not talk at all. But when we then leave that, every time we take that back into our world, and we are better partners, we are better parents, we are better friends, we are better co-workers, all because we have this space. I hope that on your darkest days, because I know that they creep in, that you can remind yourself of that. Because if you didn't fight as hard as you did to be here, a lot of us likely would not be either.
Thanks, Shannon.
I am so grateful that you chose this path and that you're tenacious and stubborn and
yes, all of those things. I mean, sometimes I don't even know if I chose this path or this path chose me, to be honest, because sometimes I kind of loved working retail, to be honest with you. I really did. But I really appreciate that. And leaving work, super feeler sessions I try and change them around depending on the time because people are all over the place. But generally speaking, the regular sessions are Mondays at 5:30 for me. I get off work 5-ish and then go straight into session, and it's 2 hours. And most nights that this happens, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this again because I'm so tired and I just want to not look at a screen. I work from home, most of the time. So then I'm staring at a screen for 9 hours, and then I'm staring at a screen for another 2 hours, and then I'm doing follow-ups or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And within 10 minutes, usually, of getting there, I'm like, oh no, now I remember why. Every time. It's, I have yet to leave. Maybe one time in 5 years have I left a super feeler session feeling worse than I did going in. Maybe. One of the things that I think is part of that is we spend a whole lot of time talking about wins. And I did my master's research on the Super Feelers Club, actually. And I think that was before your time, Shannon, because I would have interviewed you. Yeah. One of the things we found was that celebrating wins was the most important thing. Because my favorite part of the club is that we get there and we do introductions. We'll just ignore that part. But the first chunk of what we do is just celebrating whatever. And a lot of the time people come in, and I've seen this 100 times now. People come in and go, I don't have any wins. Somebody else raises their hand and then they go, it triggers a win in you. And you go, oh, right, duh, I did that too. And then you put your hand up and you have a win. And sometimes I have to cut the wins off because we've been going for an hour and we haven't run out of wins yet. And the wins, the wins are the best because It doesn't matter what the win is. We're so freaking stoked for you. You know, the win can be I brushed my teeth today and it's been 2 days. The win can be I washed my hair. Or the win could be I just got into law school. And we've literally had all of those things come up as wins. Or I'm pregnant or whatever. I'm getting married or XYZ. It doesn't matter what it is. And no matter what the win is, we are all equally stoked for you because we know how hard it is to brush your teeth and wash your hair. To be fair, I don't know how hard it is to get into law school, but I know that I'm proud as hell of you. And I know that you're going to make a huge change in the world. And like this intentional shift of come to peer support and talk about how awful everything is. We do that too, right? But we always do that second because it's not all about it being awful. There's also all these amazing things. And I would never, if I changed anything about the Super Feelers sessions, that's the one thing I will never change because I think it's the most valuable part for me and most people.
It's definitely my favorite part. But I imagine now that we've talked about all the positive parts, that there is a cost to being that person. And you talked a little bit there about, you know, coming home from work and you've had a big hard day, but you are also facilitating a group that is managing people with complex mental health issues.
And high chances of suicidality. I mean, almost every single person there has been suicidal at one point.
And I would love to just focus on the positives because there are many. Yeah. But when we're talking about leadership for you, there is a cost. And I'm wondering what that looks like for you.
There is a cost for sure. And I personally, one of the costs that I'm kind of constantly monitoring is my dedication to this cause impacting my life outside of the cause. I grew up with a workaholic mother, and that caused a lot of trauma for me and still does. And I am constantly worried that, you know, every Saturday, Sunday, I'm doing podcast episodes and then editing for God knows how many hours and then doing Super Feelers Club and then answering emails and messages from Super Feelers and then trying for the love of God to get something out on social media, which I'm very bad at. And I worry that it is going to come at the cost of my relationship with my husband. I don't have kids. I don't want kids. So that's easy. At least the person that this might cost will tell me. But I check in with him often about, is this too much? Am I too busy? Am I whatever? And thankfully, he really loves playing video games and Dungeons and Dragons. So he doesn't really give a shit. But one day that might change. I never want that cost to come to fruition. There is a cost, I think, to being this open about your mental health in any space professionally. And I talked earlier about how I didn't have a specific like aha moment when I realized that this was a positive and not just a negative, but I do have a specific memory of that aha moment when I realized that I was willing to risk a potential career for this cause. And I had wanted to apply to be in a clinical counselor or a psychologist. And I was told essentially you can apply for grad school, but if you apply and are open about your mental illness, you likely won't get in and it will impact your career, which is, first of all, not true. Second of all, I got home that day and I told my dad about this. And I just was like, I think I need to do it anyway. And he was like, okay, well, let's talk this through. And I was like, no, I truly, I don't think this is even an option. I think it's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to just deal with the consequences of it. And, there is definitely like a financial privilege to that. The irony being at the time, I didn't really have a financial privilege. Like I was not well financially. Now it's, if I get fired, it's going to really suck, but I'll be okay for a bit. I am sure it's lost me jobs somehow, but I haven't really noticed. And if anything, it all has kind of worked out in the end, right? Like the jobs that I've lost, my opinion is like, if you don't want to work with me because I have a mental illness, then I don't want to work with you either. And that seems to be working pretty well for me. The one area where I really worry about cost is I likely will want to go into politics at some point to try and make changes at a political level. That's going to come to bite me. You're going to try and do opposition research on me, who has put conversations about me masturbating on the internet. You know what I mean? Like, It's going to be a field day. I mean, they're going to have to hire so many staff to do opposition research. I don't even understand how they're going to do it. My only hope is that there's so much that they just don't bother. But, you know, in spaces like that, I do feel like one day this will bite me in the ass. But was it worth it? As far as I know, 100%. You have to weigh the pros and cons. And not only has my life been fundamentally changed, but I know that other people's lives have been fundamentally changed. And that's more than I could have ever asked for 10 years ago.
I think about the ability to live with that level of authenticity too. And when we are people, like people with BPD who tend to struggle with shame a lot and negative feelings about ourselves. When you get to that point, it's pretty extraordinary to be able to say, this is where I am now.
I suppose it is. I think eventually you just get used to it. Honestly.
Yeah.
I think the part that I don't get used to in terms of costs is the fact that doing work like this online with people with borderline personality disorder have about a 1 in 10 chance of dying by suicide, which is about 10%. I am 100% sure that we have lost super feelers to suicide and we don't know. And that breaks my fucking heart because how would I know? I respect their privacy. If there's an emergency within session, I will call an emergency contact or I will do my best I can. But if they don't come to session for 6 months, I have no ability to know what's going on. And I have no expectation that somebody will reach out to me as some random girl from the internet. You know, I mean, if obviously, like if you died by suicide, Scott would call me. That's not a question. Right. But that's different. You know, I know you both were like friends. You know, if you came to Canada, you are staying at my house. There is no question. Right. But if it's some person that came to session 3 times and we genuinely really care about them, but they just disappear.
Yeah.
And that hurts a lot to think about. Although there was a very funny story about that. One person disappeared and she was like a very regular super feeler, like very regular. And so I was concerned and she was super responsive usually. It would be like if you just dropped off the face of the earth, you know? And so I messaged her. I tried to find like her daughter on Instagram to be like, hey, I just wanted to check, like, is your mom okay? Like I tried everything I could. I was like, honestly, at this point, I'm probably going beyond the boundary that I should have, but I'm so worried about this person. And I eventually just it had been months of me trying to get in touch and find out what had happened. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to just make an assumption here that like they probably didn't make it. And like, that's devastating. And I kind of like mini mourned that loss. And then one day I'm at the ferry terminal and I get a message saying, hey, if you ever want to have a conversation on the podcast about what it's like to go to jail and have BPD, let me know. I'm out. And it had been, it was either 6 or 9 months of this person have just dropped off the face of the earth. And they had been in jail the whole time. And I like was so relieved. I was like, I thought you died. I can't believe this. Also, yes, I obviously want to have a conversation about this on the podcast. But I thought you fucking died. I can't believe this is what happened. And it's things like that where I think like that was obviously a happy outcome. I'm sure there have been really sad outcomes that we don't know about. And it breaks my heart to not know and to not have been there and to not be able to find out. And at the end of the day, I'm some random lady on the internet. And I don't think that most people know how much that community means to us. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If you just came on your own and didn't have a great social system, people would just assume that like you went to a peer support group, nobody really cares about you. But like we really care about each other. So that part really sucks. And I think that's a cost that like, again, you have to weigh these pros and it's not worth not doing because of that potential cost, because those people would likely have died by suicide anyways.
Yeah.
But it hurts. And it's a sad thing to think about.
It is. I have only been a part of this community for a couple of years, and it's a fear for me, these people that I connect with. Yeah. And our community builds outwards too. So while we have that time, but there will be people who connect within that
Yeah.
community, or there'll be a new person and someone might reach out to them. So there's these external relationships that can form as well. It's not just we get together once a month and talk via Zoom.
It's not that. Like, I think people think that's what it is. That's not what it is at all. Like, it's
not.
Like, it couldn't be further from that. And if you want it to be that, then that's fine. That can totally be what it is for you. But I would argue for most people, it's not that. And this is an interesting topic. When I was probably 23-ish, so like a couple years into my diagnosis, I was working on that child and youth mental health and substance use project. And so I had connection with the health system quite regularly, and people were kind of starting to get to know who I was. And one of the things that I had conversations with one of the local health systems about was starting peer support groups for people with BPD. It never came to fruition because they were so concerned about the risk of us all triggering each other that they would need to have a clinician sitting in the room the whole time to monitor the situation. And I said, that's not going to work, period. And they said, well, then it's too risky. We can't do it. I disagree with that greatly. I don't actually think it's that risky. I actually think that it's less risky than a lot of other things because people feel connected and validated by each other in a way that they have not felt by anybody else. And I actually think that diminishes risk rather than adds it. But anyways, that is a risk for sure. That is not a risk, in my opinion, of peer support. That's a risk of living with highly stigmatized, highly undertreated, highly difficult conditions in systems that can't provide you the support that you need and think that you're too risky to do things for, that it might be slightly innovative. So it is just part of it. And if we want to get down a rabbit hole, I also wonder sometimes if somebody did die by suicide and their family did reach out to me, what would I even do with that information? That would be a fucking shitty session. Right? I have spiraled on all of these things. I promise you. I live and breathe this stuff, and I think about this all the time. At the end of the day, it is worth it. Period.
Because how many people do you think don't end up there because of the super feelers?
Dozens. Dozens minimum. Dozens at least from the club, and then hundreds or thousands from the podcast would be my guess. I mean, there's no question. And even if it's, let's call it hundreds from the podcast, there's also probably hundreds of family members who have been positively impacted and are better able to support. And then there's hundreds of clinicians that are more able to support because they have a better understanding of what it is. And the impact is exponential. Yeah. You just can't measure it.
Not just for people with BPD either. Megan and I were talking about this yesterday, and she was saying how much she gets from the super feeler episodes, and she doesn't have a BPD diagnosis. She doesn't have a personality disorder diagnosis.
Yeah.
But she gets so much out of listening to those episodes. So I don't think it's just for people with BPD who are obviously at high risk of suicidality. But I think, like you said, for people who love someone or are supporting someone through any mental health condition, anyone with intense emotions.
Or anybody who's felt suicidal, which is like a huge range of people that is not BPD. Like BPD and suicide are interlinked, but they're not exclusive.
But it can be just for somebody who is self-aware. Like this DBT skills series.
Oh my God.
So much in that series that if you are just interested in self-development or developing other people, that you could take from that series and implement not only in your own life, but your workplace and the lives of the people around you.
Totally. Those are skills everybody needs, period.
Oh,
there's no
100%.
There's no question about that.
I'm going to ask you one last question. If the version of yourself who was struggling the most could see what you're doing now and the way that you help people feel supported and understood, what do you think she'd feel?
Super proud, shocked, and maybe slightly skeptical of that can't be true. I don't think I would believe myself, because this feels like a completely different reality of not like obviously in a delusion way, but in a like not in my wildest dreams did I imagine living with my wonderful husband with 3 cats. Are you kidding me? That's like my absolute dream. Having a job that I love and having this community and having a podcast with listeners all over the world. Like, no, there's no way that I would have believed that. And I don't think I would have believed that I would ever feel this stable, because that was a concept that did not exist. You know, even if I had at the time been able to stay alive, which is a big like if, right? Stay alive or stay out of jail, those were ifs, big ones. The chances of being on the other side of that were way higher than being where I am now. Yeah, I don't know if I would have believed that this was even possible, because it feels so much more meaningful and stable and happy than I could have dreamed.
How do you think that your support networks during that time might have supported you differently if they knew this is where you'd end up? If they knew this was your potential?
I think some people would have been like, oh, wow, she's actually going to succeed to something. Maybe we should support her more because that's going to make us look good, which is a super cynical answer, but I actually think that's probably very true. I honestly don't know for most of my people in my life if I even would have wanted them to do anything different, because aside from being able to afford like private treatment, which we weren't able to afford, and I don't think that would have changed. Potentially they would have, potentially my parents would have realized that the quote unquote investment was quote unquote worth it. That might have changed something had they put money into this earlier or at all. But I don't know if I would. I'm one of those people who I've just kind of got to the point where I'm like, everything in my life led me to this exact moment, and I'm totally cool with that.
I had a conversation yesterday where I explained that something that I went through myself, actually, I'm not sorry that I went through it, because it helped me to be the support person that somebody else who I loved really needed. And I realised the irony of that statement when I made it. And I said, I know that's just taking a really shitty present and wrapping it in expensive gift wrap. But it's true.
Exactly. And I'm not everything in the world is great and shiny and wonderful and sunshine and rainbows. Nope. I am not that kind of person. If you know me, I am a cynic. I'm not that person. And I still believe that everything in my life led me to this moment, and it was fucking shitty. But without all of that shit, we wouldn't be here.
I want to say thanks, Laurie. If our listeners want to find you, where's the best places for them to do that?
Yeah, great question. I will send Shannon, she knows where all my links are, but I'll send Shannon all my links anyways. So a couple things.
They will be in the show notes. Yeah.
So generally speaking, I mean, if you're interested in listening to the podcast, you can just find it on any of your preferred podcast apps. It's just Superfeeler or BPD podcast. You can search up either. It should show up. If it doesn't, then that's a bigger problem. So please tell me. If you are interested in coming to the Superfeelers Club, you're super welcome to join us. We'd love to have you. You do not need to have a borderline personality disorder diagnosis. Most of us do. So I do preface a lot of people that because of the nature of my following, that's kind of where people come from. But a lot of people might have suspected diagnoses or self-diagnoses or whatever, and that's totally fine. If you struggle with intense emotions, you're going to benefit from it. You can find that information at my website, which is www.laurieedmondson.com, and then /peer support if you want to go directly to it, but it's on there anyways. And you can register. It's all free. And then I have 2 different Instagram accounts. So one is at the Superfeeler. That's kind of more the podcast and the peer support site, because I like to keep my things slightly separate. And then my personal stuff is all on at Laurie Ann Ed, LaurieAnned, which we'll put in the show notes as well. And that's more if you just care about my personal life and my ridiculous cats, who I don't think Gus screamed at you this time, which is impressive.
He did not, and I am disappointed.
I know, he's a character. I mean, if anything, come look at my Instagram just to look at pictures of this ridiculous cat. He's a model, let's call it, from Jurassic times or something. So yeah, I think that's all the places you can find me. I don't have TikTok because I'm too old and I'm too lazy. And everything else, you can always just send me an email, reach out, anything like that. It's all via my website.
Just before we go, to leave it on a happy note, if there was someone who can relate to your story and go, there's some intense stuff going on for me, what message do you want to share with them?
That intensity is not a bad thing, and this is a really shit time that you're in. But if you can get through that, you will be able to have something on the other side of it that makes that shit time really worthwhile. Most of the time. I can't speak for everyone. It's not about having a diagnosis of anything, really. It's about finding your community. And so if your community is the same as Shannon and I's community, wonderful. If it's not, I just can't encourage you enough to find your people, because your people will make everything better.
Laurie's story is a reminder that leadership doesn't always begin with certainty or confidence. Sometimes it begins with survival and with the courage to speak honestly about the parts of life we often are told to hide. Through that honesty, Laurie has created spaces and change within systems where people who feel deeply, people who have often felt misunderstood, can finally realise they are not alone. As always, we will link all of the things that Laurie spoke about in the show notes, and you can find those at ifthesetreescouldtalk.com.au. Laurie, thank you for the work you do and for being willing to lead in a way that helps so many of us realise that we can keep going too.
Thanks for having me, Shannon. Love you so much.
Love you too.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If These Trees Could Talk and What Would They Say are productions of Bellevue Studio. Our host is Shannon Walters, executive and audio production by Megan Anderson, with socials and marketing managed by Mia Oberdorf. We always appreciate hearing your thoughts, so if you would like to support the show, you can rate, review and subscribe. To stay up to date between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. For more information on this episode or to connect with our guests, you'll find everything you need to know in the show notes at ifthesetreescouldtalk.com.au. We're grateful to have you with us, and we look forward to sharing what comes next. Thanks for being here.